Now, you've probably heard of the Embraer 145, a pretty common regional jet, especially here in the US. But have you heard of the Embraer 145XR? I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear XR? I mean, for me, it's the iPhone, because I used to have it back in the day and it was fire. But what exactly is the 145XR? Well, that's the focus of today's video, as we fly this unique variant from Albany to Washington Dulles. Good afternoon from the active construction zone that is Albany International Airport. Upgrades to the terminal are making great progress as part of the airport's $100 million renovation that should be complete in 2026. Until then, however, there are some slight inconveniences. For example, the airport's wonderful business center that I've covered before is part of what's being renovated, and so for now, it's completely closed off. The summer season usually means bigger planes in Albany, and I was excited to see this American A321 arriving from Charlotte. This route sees American flying planes as small as the CRJ-700 to as big as the A321, and while mainline aircraft like the A319 and A320 fly it year-round, the A321 only comes during the summer. And the same is true for Delta Airlines, who upgauge some Atlanta flights to the A321 as well. Otherwise, Delta primarily flies the CRJ-900s from LaGuardia and Detroit, along with A320s to Atlanta, and the occasional A319 to Detroit as well. United and Allegiant depart out of Concourse A, and this is where the bulk of the construction is taking place. As you might recall from previous videos, this corridor used to be filled with local artwork along the walls, most of which have been temporarily removed. But I have to say, I'm loving these new renderings for the new Concourse A, which, once renovations are complete, will surely feel a lot more open and especially modern so that it matches the rest of the terminal. Now, for those unaware, Albany used to be a micro hub for regional airline CommuteAir operating under Continental Connection from 2002 to 2005. The carrier would fly Beechcraft 1900D turboprop aircraft to cities across the Northeast and even into Canada. Unfortunately, this model soon proved unprofitable, ultimately leading to the end of this micro hub. Now, I'm only mentioning this because those flights would operate from gates in the lower level here of Concourse A. Now, with the construction, much of the lower level is currently off limits, but here at least you get to see part of it. And while CommuteAir no longer has a hub in Albany today, they do have a maintenance base here for the Embraer 145XRs, which currently fly on the Washington Dulles route, and this right here is our aircraft for today. Now, because it is an Embraer 145, it can't fit rollerboard bags in the overhead bins, so all of them have to be gate checked into the cargo hold. You'll leave the bags at the end of the jetway before you board the plane. Now, it is what it is, but definitely an annoying process, especially for those on tight connections. Now, unlike American Eagle, who normally block off the last row of the 145 for basic economy passengers, United Express lets anybody sit here, so for the first time, I'm seated in 18A in the very last row of the aircraft. The 145s have personal air vents and reading lights, along with the usual seat features like a large table, seat pocket, and fairly decent leg space once you get settled in. So that A320 next door is operating the Chicago flight. Now, because my final destination is Peoria, you're probably wondering why not just take that flight for a much easier travel day. Well, first of all, where's the fun in that? And second of all, I was really hoping to fly the 757 from Dulles to Chicago. Now, my connection in Dulles was originally scheduled for an hour, but then shortly after we pushed back, the captain made the following announcement.
We're gonna get taxi and get a little close to the runway and just double check on that time, see if they can squeeze us in a little before that, but as of right now, that's best case that we're looking at, so we'll update you if anything changes. We do apologize for that slight delay, but once we're airborne, we'll be able to hustle over to Washington Dulles quickly and safely for you, so for now, just sit back, relax, enjoy the flight, thank you.
So it actually wasn't because of weather like I had initially thought, but because of traffic flow restrictions into Dulles that caused us to be delayed on the ground here in Albany. So with an expected wait time on the ground of 40 minutes, combined with the fact that I had an already short 1-hour layover where I both have to wait for my bag and change terminals in an airport that I've never connected in, this was quite literally the last thing that I wanted to hear. Of course, none of this was in my control, and while I expected the worst when I got to DC, I was prepared for some potentially insane cardio. now that we're airborne, let's finally address the main point of this video. What is the Embraer 145XR? Well, simply put, the XR stands for extra range, meaning this aircraft can fly further than the standard 145, around 2,000 nautical miles as compared to the standard 145's 1,550. The XR variant is also easily identifiable by its cosmetic differences, the most obvious one being the winglets. But you'll also notice the presence of strakes below the tail of the aircraft, and these differences all contribute to aerodynamic improvements like lower drag. But while the XR is slightly different on the outside, the inside is exactly the same with an all-economy 50-seat layout and no Wi-Fi, at least here on United Express and also American Eagle. Currently, United Express is the only major airline flying the XR, all of which were inherited from Continental Express. Although there are a handful of examples flying for airlines in the US like Denver Air Connection. Now, even though this was a 1-hour flight, there was no service aside from water, which really shows that when flying regional airlines on these shorter flights, it seems that the presence of service depends on the crew, because I've flown 35 to 40 minute flights with a full service and 1-hour flights without it. But anyway, it's time to land in the nation's capital, or nearby it at least. Our approach took us past the DC proper area on downwind before making a 180 over Manassas, Virginia, and landing on runway 35 right. And welcome to Dulles, my first time here in 13 years, and my first time coming here as a connecting passenger. Now, we landed just after 4:40, which is right when my connection to Chicago started boarding. And given I still had to wait with everybody else to collect our roller bags as they were unloaded from the cargo hold, and that too changed terminals, I have never felt more nervous about a connection. But whatever happens, it's going to happen for the best. So on that note, we're going to end the video here because I got to try and make this next flight. So stay tuned for the next installment to see how we manage. With that said, until next time, take care everyone, and I'll see you then.